Hello, and welcome to another episode of Xact Hacks, brought to you by Actionable Insights. My name is Seth Harrison, and today I want to talk about wall thickness. As you can see here, I have an Xactimate 28 estimate open, and plenty of rooms ready to show off the examples of how wall thickness can be changed, and the various properties that change when you change it. So, let's start with room 1. I have dropped in a normal room here, 12 by 12. And there's a couple different ways you can change the wall thickness. First and foremost, as you can see, I have the whole room selected. And I can come up here to the Properties menu and come down to my wall thickness. And I can change the wall thickness of every wall in this room to 8 inches. And you can see that it gets much thicker. Now, I'm going to hit Control-Z to undo that. So I can show you can also change the properties of an individual wall. So if you click that individual wall, its Properties window will come up. And then I can just make this left wall 8 inches by itself. Or I can come here and go, I want to change this wall and this wall. These two are exterior walls. So you would click the first wall, and then you would hold Control to select the second wall. Now you can see I have 2 walls selected. And I can come to the properties. Note that it says here 4 inches, we'll go to 8 inches. So now I've specifically changed the 2 exterior walls that I called out by clicking one wall, holding Control, and selecting the other wall. Important to note that if I went back to the room properties now and I went to go check my wall thickness, it's going to say multiple because not all walls are the same. So if you ever see that multiple in greater than, less than signs, it's just saying that there's multiple measurements that apply to this variable, this wall thickness. So it's hard to define. Secondly, what happens if you change the wall thickness after you've sketched a room or even potentially your whole sketch? Let's change this entire wall thickness of this one room to 8 inches. And you'll note that this went from a 12 by 12 room to 11.8 by 11.8. So by doubling the wall thickness from 4 to 8 inches, we've actually removed 4 inches from the internal variables. So now 11.8, 11.8 instead of 12 by 12. So what does this mean? If you are going to be changing wall thicknesses, I highly recommend that you change your wall thicknesses first before you go build your entire sketch. Because as we can see here, changing wall thicknesses, and I'll show you in a second, it doesn't matter if it's internal or external wall that you're changing the thickness of, it's going to affect the measurements of the inside. Let's take another example here. Here I have 2 rooms next to each other, 12 by 12, 12 by 12. And I'm going to change specifically the thickness of this wall to 8 inches here. Now you'll see these both turn into 11.10 by 11.10. So I added 4 inches to that middle wall thickness, and it took 2 inches from each side. So it split up the difference evenly between both rooms. If I wanted to get these back to a 12 by 12 room, then I would have to come out here and move this, and I would have to come out here and move this. And now I have my 12 by 12 rooms again to ensure that my internal variables are correct, and that middle wall that is thicker is reflected appropriately as the 8-inch wall that it is in this example. Now, what I've done over here with rooms 5, 6, 7, and 8 was to give an example of how wall thickness does or does not react to the macros that come with Xactimate and your various calculations. So first, I'm actually going to drop this in up here. I thought this was interesting when I was preparing this. Room 9, I'm going to come up here and graphically estimate ins BT4. And first, I'm just going to place it in the entire room. And you'll notice that the calculation here is floor. It's the natural calculation for the insulation line, and I'm going to drop it in, is F. But we're probably not dropping in a ton of insulation in this floor here. So what you'll have to do is come down here and define the variables yourself. And you can see here I've done PF times 2 to reflect putting back insulation of a 2-foot flood cut. And note that when I made this wall big and thick, it didn't change anything. The internal variables are still the same. So wall thickness is not affecting a ton in an estimate. It's nice to reflect, and it may be important in certain areas. What you need to ensure here, as you can see here, is I've come around and done the insulation macro. So I came up here to macros, and I said, show me my macro list. And I came down here to the insulation, standard insulation options. And I have 2 rooms here that have the same wall thickness. And you can see by the calculation that comes with that macro, room 7.c, it's calculating the insulation just off the ceiling here. Same thing here, room 8c. And both are 12 by 12 rooms. Even though this external wall over here is twice as thick, the macros that are coming with Xactimate are not running or taking into consideration the volume of the wall thickness if you've changed the wall thickness. So your job as an estimator or adjuster is to ensure that if you require more insulation to stick in a thicker wall, that you're calculating that properly and ensuring that you've captured all the detail-oriented line items and calculations that you're supposed to in your estimate. So, wall thickness. It affects the internal variables when you change it. So best practice would be if you have to change exterior wall thickness or interior wall thickness, it's better to do it first. And then note that if I were just to create a new room here, it's going to copy the original measurements. So if your sketching style is to build each room individually or separately and bring them together, you're going to have to change that wall thickness every time. So if you do want to change it first, I would recommend changing it first and then building the rooms off of that so it's maintaining that wall thickness that you've defined in the first room of your sketch. And if you're curious, if you would like to change your default wall thickness, let's say you work in a specific environment where you know all the walls of the various properties are 6 inches, you can come here to Control Center. This is the main Xactimate 28 window. Control Center, Preferences, under the Project Sketch document, you'll find room defaults. So Xactimate will ship with a standard wall thickness of 4 inches, which is standard across most properties. But if you have the desire to change it based on a project that you're working on, you can go into the Preferences tab and make any substantive changes there. So this has been an Xact Hack on wall thickness and how it reacts, how it affects internal variables, the best practices and order of operations when you're changing wall thicknesses, and how or how not some of the macros that come with Xactimate or the calculations, that the default calcs that come with the line items, for the most part, do not take wall thickness into consideration. So it's our job to make sure that we're capturing all the details and justifying them appropriately. This has been another Xact Hack. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next week.